Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a Tuesday, December 10th, 2024 episode of Rickcast. I am the aforementioned Rick, and in a sea of vapid and pointless podcasts, you have just stumbled on another one. I hope you're all having a fantastic Tuesday, the 10th day of Advent for my Catholic brothers and sisters. Everything going well for you. Thanks for stopping by to the I called it the bar. It's not a ripoff of anything else. I once had somebody tell me, interestingly enough, that even though I'm Irish and Italian, my name Barrett is, you know how they're like, oh, your name is Ironsmith because your great grandfather was an iron worker or something like that. I had a teacher back in like high school tell me my surname comes from the fact that my family was drunks. So we were bar rats. So hey man, welcome my little bar rats. If you want to hang out with me, that's fantastic. And if you like what you're seeing and you're on the X, gonna give it to you with Elon Musk, do me a favor and follow me on that platform. And for all my fantastic takes, funny memes, and overall good time. Also on Rumble and YouTube, if you are watching in the replay, leave a comment. Subscribe, share it, help me grow on those platforms as well. Try to give you guys a little bit of entertainment, really, because I'm sure most of you have seen this stuff, especially if you're on X at this point of the day. You've seen all these stories, you've seen all these topics, and you're kind of just hanging out here. Maybe you can converse with some other people in the chat, or if you want to drop me a line and something like that in the comment section, that would be awesome as well. Just to kind of get a little bit more of a recap, maybe what the latest news is on something, and generally just a good time. You indulgers of news and pop culture. You know, yesterday was like a nuclear bomb of news because you had Daniel Penny and then you had Luigi Mangione, which, by the way, I'm going to get to you people who are not Italian, pretending that you are Italian, saying his name, because that's even more annoying than anything else. I'm talking to you e-girls on TikTok, where you all of a sudden thought you became Italian because you could say his name, like Nintendo. But then, hey, at least the people in Nintendo gave more respect to Luigi than you people. Anyway, you had a nuclear bomb of news with those two stories, and then you had the Syria international news with Syria toppling over and having that implications on the world stage happen. And now today, it's like perusing through the news for today's show. A little bit more pop culturally than of course we're going to talk about Luigi, because he is a story that is seeming to consistently be in the news, obviously because he was arraigned today, and now we're getting more stuff about him in the manifesto, or whatever you want to call the manifesto. I read it. Some people say it was handwritten. I read a typed one, so maybe he did two drafts of a manifesto. I don't know. We'll see whatever's going on with that. Have you read the manifesto? You let me know in the comment section down below. And does that change your identity? The left is very strange right now because they're on the one hand celebrating this man's actions, but on the other hand, they're trying to claim he's right wing. And there's interesting things that have come out today about Mr. Mangione and what is his back problems led him to, as far as what really probably put him over the deep end. But we'll talk about that. Caitlin Clark is the athlete of the year, according to Time Magazine. I think it's very deserved. Of course, people are upset because it's the internet and it's 2024, soon to be 2025. People are upset that she, quote unquote, bend the knee. And in particular, one, Mr. Jason Whitlock, which I get. Big fan. I watch your show as much as I can, almost every day. Big fan of Fearless. But he's not happy with Rachel Clark. I don't know who the hell that is. With Caitlin Clark, her supposed bending the knee and giving credit to the women of the WNBA before her, and I have a different take, obviously, despite the fact that I respect completely what Mr. Whitlock says. I don't think it's as much of a surrender as it is a political. And I don't even like the show, but most of you will get the right. It's a very Game of Thrones move by Caitlin Clark in this regard, in the matter of survival. And I'll explain that more as we get to a third story. ATF chief may be named. There's now a third name in the hat, which is funny. We've heard about everything else that Trump is nominating people for, and yet the ATF has been strangely quiet. There is the underground buzz, which I am 100% in support in my organization, L1121 Strategies. It is a Catholic pro 2A gun group, which also specializes in training with a Catholic foundation. It's me, completely endorse Brandon Herrera, the AK guy for ATF head. He should be the ATF head, and if he's not, there is a huge crime, an injustice that has been done if that's the case. But we have one, Blake Masters. He kind of popped up out of nowhere over the weekend. He is angling for the job. Prominent gun people on X have supported this nomination, which is, no, you should not support it. You should only want the AK guy, which I am 100% in favor of. But it looks like he is now angling for said job. And it's interesting that we're seeing multiple people in one of the few positions that is very impactful, at least to the Republican side. The left doesn't care who the ATF head is, because they need to it's just another bureaucrat that'll push Democratic talking points. For Republicans, GOP, gun people, whatever you want to call us, the ATF head is something we wanted to see Trump appoint somebody good for a couple reasons. A, Pam Bondi is a terrible 2A. Maybe she's changed. I don't know. But Pam Bondi is not great in that role based off her past history. I hope she proves me wrong. Not that she needs to prove me wrong. I'm just some guy on the internet. But we'll see what happens after that with her. And so she's terrible with defending the God-given right to keep and bear arms. And then Trump obviously bump stock Donnie from the first administration. Seeing who he would pick for ATF head would be a nice olive branch to the 2A community, considering he needed every vote to rig, make it too big to rig. And we'd like to see somebody in there that would help rein in that agency, rein it in from the feral nature that it's acted under the Joe Biden regime, as it's run ragged all over these United States. And finally, little pop culture things as I try to do, right? A little bit different. Although yesterday was just news. I think that's because Mondays are always going to be more news because of the 2-day weekend. But 28 years later has been released. The trailer, even though it comes out next year, the first trailer has dropped. And in a sea of poorly cut trailers, and most trailers are poorly cut because their editing's kind of funky and they all use the same 80s track that's slowed down and played by piano. This one is 100% different, and it's really captures the vibe, honestly, of the first 28 days later. 28 years later is a weird story because it became more corporatized than 28 days. And so it's nice to see Danny Boyle and these guys return kind of to the formula of 28 days later. No, I'm not a giant. I just like the minis. So, that's how I make myself feel better. I go around and buy like the mini ketchups and all that stuff. So I feel like a giant. But anyway, kidding aside, let's get to our first story of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell if you want to support the program in another way. First of all, watching the program, huge support. Thank you. If you can retweet it, that would be great as well. And if you want to follow me, that would be awesome as well. If you're looking for a gift during the holidays, this show is sponsored by my book, The Armed Catholic, The Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense, available now at Amazon.com. Shameless plug aside, let's get to our first story of the day. All right, folks, Luigi Maglione. Now, first of all, let me get my ugly face back in the picture. To the e-girls of TikTok, hear me, please. You are not Italian if you try to overpronounce some of the vowels. And there was a woman, and I know I got the Trump hands. You're going to have to forgive me on that. There was a woman on TikTok, which people take the TikToks and they were posting on X and Instagram. That's how just the virus of those things just kind of continue to seep into soft belly of our social media. And she did this expose where like the Mangione family was apparently like funding elderly centers. It was ridiculous. True crime. We will say the ladies of true crime TikTok are working overtime, not usually to the best of their abilities, but hey, whatever, all for clicks, right? She goes, and all I'll say is she's like, Luigi Mangione. And then every time she's Mangione, lady, you're not Italian. I don't even know where you live, but it's probably middle America. And you know the most Italian thing that you've had is Olive Garden. So can you please stop overpronouncing different syllables in an attempt to try and sound sophisticated? Because you don't sound sophisticated. You sound more like an American stereotype. Just say Mangione like the rest of us. Luigi Mangione. Give me a freaking break, dude. Anyway, all kidding aside, now that gripe's out of the way, the latest updates on Mr. Mangione he was arraigned today. This was his mugshot that came out, which of course, you know, the women of leftist, of leftist Twitter and everything discovered that pansexualism and all that stuff actually doesn't exist. All it took was one dude for all of them to be like, yeah, all that stuff doesn't really matter. This dude's probably getting more love letters than, I don't know, Tom Jones at a 1970s concert. So it's a reference most of you won't get, but we're going to move on. But this dude, you know, the newest heartthrob of the left, and I'll continue to say it, the left loves to take their martyrs, their secular martyrs, and their people who perform terrorist act like the Zarnoff brothers. Never forget that the younger Zarnoff was elevated to a rock star status. Remember with the Rolling Stone headline and everything. So they love to do it. They love to glamorize their little foot soldiers because it really, it's a great indoctrination path for other incel leftist men who are trying to impress ladies and can't do it in any other way. So they have to try and do it this way. I hope it doesn't go that way, but you know how indoctrination works. This was his mugshot that was released. There was another photo, I don't have it, where Mangione was in holding and he apparently wet himself. He urinated on himself and everybody was like, oh, dude, what a loser, blah, 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 blah. Couple things. Maybe he is. Maybe he just, you know, wet himself after. But I would just, let me offer a couple points on that. The first one is that probably happened. And if you've ever talked to combat vets, I'm not one, but if you talk to them, you know, in the first firefight, that kind of happens more often than not. You know, you'll hear stories about that. But secondly, I think Mangione really was going into this thing. Apparently, he had $10,000 worth of cash that he is now disputing, $8,000 in U.S. currency, $2,000 in a foreign currency that has not been identified. And he actually disputes. He says the police planted that $10,000, despite the fact that, you know, he had been withdrawing money from his account, though he hadn't spoken to anybody, and that time that he went absent. We'll talk about that in a moment here on Rickcast. So the idea is that he disputed this money, but I don't think he did. I think he took it out, and I think he had a grandiose plan. And I know Hannah Claire Brimlow mentioned this with the Quartercast, that he kept calling the CEOs of the healthcare industry parasites. And if you read the manifesto, which the manifesto that I read, the one that was typed, I don't know the one you read because apparently it was handwritten, like with a McDonald's napkin. But the manifesto that I read vindicated my initial thought, which was this guy is scorn from a family member being denied claims. And apparently it was his mother. His mother went through agonizing pain and, you know, specialists and all these other things denied and so forth. But he apparently said in these manifestos that parasites. So it apparently looks like it was going to be a spree of different types or different CEOs or just different healthcare administrators. It didn't have to be CEOs. It could have been a potential plot to terrorize the healthcare industry. This is just wild speculation on my part. which would be the reason why he didn't leave the country as soon as possible, which everybody said, this guy's in Colombia, this guy's in Belize, this guy's somewhere, and you're never going to find him again. Yet he was at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania having a hash brown when they caught him. Why? Two things. One, I think he actually wanted to make this an extended series of events where he was going to terrorize multiple people. Now, of course, that was destroyed the moment he got honeypotted, as a true Italian would, with a female that he just had to pull down his mask and flirt with that winning smile. The only problem with that winning smile is now it got plastered everywhere, which pretty much made his escape null and void. And two, I believe, honestly, he was going to try and make this a multiple person spree. So you had that money. You had the fact that he has very much, outside of the yelling, which we'll see in a moment when he was dragged into the courthouse, he's been very cold on this. There hasn't been any real outbursts of emotion. Everything has seemed calculated, which you would get with an engineer. If you know any engineers, you understand that they're pretty calculated people. They rarely show emotion, period. That's just their way because they're so smart. I mean, not every single one of them, but this guy apparently is 130 IQ. He's got two degrees and valedictorian and all this other kind of stuff. So that would make sense in a way to have a cold, rational thought process. So that's his mugshot. This is him coming out of the courthouse. I don't know if we're going to be able to hear it, but we're going to try and give it a shot anyway. So he's getting taken out. Somebody asks him a question and he yells out to them.
Don't.
So everybody knows the first part, that this is an insult to the American people and the way they're living and so forth. That's the first real bit of emotion that we've seen out of him. Now, granted, we haven't seen much of him, but every other photo, he's been cold and everything's been very calculated on this part. So this is where a lot of people are debating motives. Some people like myself think the motive is due to a family member, his mother, being denied coverage and slowly dying and withering away in pain while nobody could do anything for her. And a lot of people are thinking that this is the reason that Maglione suffered from back pain and underwent spinal surgery in 2023. A friend from Honolulu tells reporters. Apparently, it was based off of a surfing accident. He knew that dating and being physically intimate with his back conditions was impossible. I remember him telling me that, and my heart just breaks. So apparently he could not have serious relations with anybody else, man, woman, or whatever. Which, I don't know, it would be pretty terrible if for, a young 26-year-old kid, very good looking, all these other kinds of things that's been ripped away from him. I don't know. A lot of this stuff is conjecture at this point because you're getting bits and pieces of stuff, especially where you have the argument that he is a psyop, that he is a plant, that this whole thing is being done to distract. When you look at this kid's resume, it's just absolutely crazy. Apparently his college hobby was 3D printing, which both the gun and the suppressor, according to reports. Now, of course, we will not know this because Twitter, while it is the media, can also be a cesspool of misinformation and stuff like this where I'm just wildly speculating on things. But I'm trying to give you a track of logic on that. But the suppressor and the gun, the bottom part, the receiver, the part that's actually serialized, the top part was actually metal, the firing pin, the spring, the barrel. That was something you can buy online. You can buy a slide for, especially for a Glock caliber, a Glock model, pretty much at any gun site and have it shipped to your door. You don't need to have it. You don't need a 4473 for it. You only need a 4473 for the serialized part of your firearm. That's usually the receiver part, the trigger and the firing group and so forth. But apparently his hobby was 3D printing, making much more innocent things former pals reveal. It's funny, I recall him being into 3D printing in sophomore year, who lived next door. I mean, he was making much more innocent things then. Cops have said Mangione allegedly used what appears to be a 3D printed ghost gun, which it's just a ghost gun is a term that the left uses to scare you. Okay, because it's untraceable. One thing I'll tell you, and this is what I get from my my firearms, you know, when I do my firearms presentations and stuff like that, is that a ghost gun can be any firearm, whether it's like a Glock that you buy out of an academy or something. As long as the serial number is not found, you can, if you scrape it off, that's a ghost gun. Now, they won't tell you that because they want you to think that, you know, Mangione and your average person is going home and using their Canon printer to print up a firearm and then walk out the street. Because unfortunately, many people, you know, the gun community knows this. There's not a lot of people in the gun community. If you look at 330 million people in this union, in addition to the fact that, you know, yeah, we have a lot of guns in this union, but the people who own them, you know, not really that high as compared to the population. So when they start talking about 3D printed this and 3D printed that, it's going to be a way to scare people like Pam Bondi, Trump, and others into getting ghost guns. Their goal is to get ghost guns on the NFA. I'm calling it here now. Nobody else has said this. That's what I think they're trying to do. They're going to try and get ghost guns on the NFA. Instead of getting things like suppressors off the NFA, which I have been begging people to not squander this opportunity and do, they're unfortunately going to turn around and try and push Gab Giffords and, you know, all these other stupid Bloomberg-backed gun control groups. They're going to try and get ghost guns on the NFA. That's their end goal, I'm telling you now. So, of course, that's why he would have his 3D printed suppressor and his 3D printed firearm on him 4 days after the crime was committed, which kind of generally leads to the thought that he was going to try and do this with more than one person. This was one of the gentlemen that was at the McDonald's in Pennsylvania that called the that was there when he was found and the police were called. It's very interesting to hear because Mangione actually heard them talking about him, which is very strange because he heard them talking about him. He knew he was identified, yet he didn't want to run. Maybe because he didn't have anywhere to run to. Maybe he thought it was useless. Maybe he just didn't want to deal with this anymore. Maybe he just thought the gig was up. But once this was reported, he was done. And then finally, the last thing we'll talk about here is bail has been denied. New court order reveals that the sacrilegious Luigi Maglione has been denied. I don't know why I had to throw that in there. GSC. But it has been denied as he fights extradition to New York. So, yeah, the extradition to New York is going to be capital murder if he gets back there, which I don't see why he wouldn't. I don't see how he can fight that, because he's on film and they have ID of him. You know, back then when he pulled down his mask to flirt with that young lady and all of this other apparent evidence. So we'll see how that goes. But as of right now, Mangione's been charged in Pennsylvania. More stuff has come out about him. The fact that there's a little bit of an argument between whether the money that was found on him was his, was it planted? What was his true motivations? Was it something about him? Was it something about his family? So we don't know much more than whatever little snippets are being released to us at the time. But it looks like the story is going to dominate this news cycle for the rest of the week. So hopefully I will be able to bring this to you tomorrow as well here on Rickcast. And by the way, I just want to tell you, 1,000 people are watching right now on X, which thank you all so very much for watching. It's cool. I just know what else to say. It's pretty cool. Real quick, Thursday, Rickcast is going to be a little later. Usually it's at 6. It'll probably be beyond 7 on Thursday because I'm being interviewed by a man named Michael Hitchburn of the Lepanto Institute about my book, The Armed Catholic, The Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense. So it will be on Thursday. It will just be on a little bit later, and it'll probably just be a speed run just to keep you guys informed of what's going on, because I promised you 5 days a week, and I'm going to do the best I can to get you those 5 days every single time. All right, let's get to our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, from CNN.com, ironically reporting on Time.com's Athlete of the Year, which is one Miss Caitlin Clark, which, is fantastic. I have been a fan of Miss Clark since she showed up, and it's pretty cool that she's being recognized. What do I mean? Especially with female sports, and the fact that female sports are so desperate to continue their LGBT stranglehold on those sports, in particular the WNBA, which I don't think any one of us can disagree that it's pretty much the entire WNBA has been a playground for the LGBT MAP movement. And so to see her being recognized, at least by one major outlet, is pretty impressive. And it's good. I think it's a good thing, because it shows that that talent is rewarded. And it's finally breaking this idea that, oh, well, Caitlin's been nice, but it's really Caitlin and Angel Reese. Is it really Caitlin and Angel Reese? That is not a bird magic combo. Now, Angel Reese's people were smart enough to hook themselves up to Caitlin Clark because they knew she was shooting up to the ceiling, and then they were going to be just by association, linked up with Caitlin Clark. So good for them. Angel Reese, she's a fine player, nowhere close to the skill of somebody like Caitlin Clark. But let's take a look at the Time magazine, or the CNN article talking about Time magazine, because it's all very incestuous, apparently. Caitlin Clark, who helped draw crowds to arenas around the country and drive up viewership numbers in her final year of college, and then her rookie year in the WNBA, has been named Time's Athlete of the Year. I think that's a great understatement. She didn't draw crowds. She shattered records. She's a generational talent, and she's been impactful. And it was kind of interesting with the culture war, how, the rise of Caitlin Clark this year was tied to, not fair to her. We in the culture war, we like to kind of tie people's hands to certain values, but because she was from Iowa and she had a boyfriend and she went to a smaller school, we were like, oh, conservative values. Oh! And we just kind of fell in love with her, and not just said, hey, this girl's really good. She, the best compliment you can tell her is that she plays like a dude, and she's really good at playing ball, and it's actually fun to watch her play. Unlike a lot of, WNBA players who, listen, you're a professional athlete. I can't take that away from you. But the standard of professional athletes lowered a little bit by that. Anyway, Clark, 22, helped continue in 2024 growing the popularity of the WNBA. That is a big fat lie, because the WNBA was not popular in 2023. So I don't know how you're going with, oh, well, it continued the rise of it. No, it started when she showed up. So nice try, Time. You like how they do that kind of stuff? In her debut season with the Indiana Fever, following a stellar career at Iowa, Clark took home Rookie of the Year and was named an All-WNBA first team, first rookie to do so since 2008 during the 2024 season. She also did a bunch of other stuff. That was great. Meanwhile, ratings for the WNBA regular season and postseason, not just games involving Clark, were up. Come on, man. Come on. You're not convincing anybody with this article. No, not just games. It was just not a game with Caitlin Clark. It was everybody. Yeah, everybody got, all their games went up. Maybe. But if like 10 people were watching, and because of Caitlin Clark, 12 people decided to watch instead of 10, we're not going to say that is a drastic rise in viewership, because all of the arenas that Caitlin Clark was not in were still half empty. So let's not try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Additionally, the WNBA had its highest attendance total in 22 years because of Caitlin Clark. It was blah, 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 blah. Last week, Clark debuted in Sportico's highest paid female athletes list, with their earnings totaling $11.1 million. So yeah, because she's making endorsements because people, and like Nike's not even pushing her. She signed a deal with Nike, but she's being put on the sidelines for I don't even know the other girl's name, but she's playing second fiddle to another girl right now because the WNBA does not want Clark front and center because they don't want a white woman promoting the league. It's that simple. And that's why I have to disagree with the great Jason Clark. He is fantastic. I am a huge fan of his. And so to have him say this, it's kind of disingenuous on my part, or on his part, that he's going to say this, where he states, and I quote, Caitlin Clark has bent the knee, kissing the rear. This is Jason Clark. Rear of black women is a rite of passage in the WNBA. This is something that comes from the Time article. Clark is cognizant of the racial underpinnings of her stardom. Quote, I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is a privilege, unquote, says Clark. Quote, a lot of those players in the league that have been really good have been black players. This league has kind of been built on them. The more we can appreciate that, highlight that, talk about that, and then continue to have brands and companies invest in those players that have made this league incredible, I think it's very important. I have to continue to try and change that. The more we can elevate black women, the more it's going to be a beautiful thing. Now, Jason is not very happy with this statement. I get it. I get it. I understand it. She may believe this 100%, right? There was that time during the election where she liked the Taylor Swift post endorsing Kamala Harris. Remember, she's a 22-year-old girl. She's a 22-year-old girl. She's probably going to lean more left in her opinions than not, just naturally. What's the saying? If you're not a liberal at 22, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 35, you have no brain. She's a liberal. She's young. Let her be young. And if you can't hold your political views to her and make her held hostage to it. And so her team also, that feels like a political statement that her team wrote. Right? Her management, her publicists, they're like, listen, you're going to get this award and you got to head off the racist backlash that's going to come your way. Okay? Regardless of everything you've done, you have to understand that the black queens in the NBA or the WNBA are going to be so angry that specific women that they have tried to highlight have not been given this award before. You've been given this award. What are they going to say? They're going to say they gave it to you because you are a white woman. And they are going to look at all the buzzwords she's using. White privilege. I have all this. She even says, I kind of earned it, but I have this privilege. That is her team saying, yeah, you can give yourself credit, but you have to acknowledge the privilege, because if you don't, you're going to get run out of town, and there's going to be everybody on ESPN and all these places are just going to dog walk you for weeks because you didn't give respect to the people that came before you. Give them a tip of the cap and move on. I think from a political standpoint, I think it's a brilliant move, right? I'm not going to expect a 22-year-old who nearly got her eye removed from her socket in the playoffs by that girl with them long, nasty nails. She nearly lost an eye in the first round of the playoffs, and you want her to come out and be like, and espouse your values? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's unfortunate, but I think live now, give the flowers to the people in front of you. That gives you a little bit of leeway next season, because there's a lot of women in the WNBA that do not like Caitlin Clark. They don't. It's that simple. Despite the fact that she was bringing in money for them, despite the fact that the only reason they were on private jets was because of her, despite the fact that people actually gave a rip about the WNBA was because of her, they still don't like her. For whatever reason, you can make that up on your own. They don't. So she's got to get around this. How does she get around it? Oh, well, we have to respect the women that came before us, and, they're black, and we have to make sure that blah, 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 blah. Okay, let her do it. I think it's a very smart political statement. She's 22, 23 years old. Let her, after she's the all-time leading scorer in WNBA history, after she's a legend, let her come out and say what she needs to say. Right now, she's just got to survive. And so I don't want to disagree with Jason Whitlock, but I'm not as disappointed. I look at it like, yeah, you got to do it. If you don't do it, your life is going to be miserable. If you don't, they're going to absolutely just rip you apart mercilessly. And now that she's done that, when training camp comes around, this will not be as much of an issue. Because if she didn't give credit to the queens that came before her, they're going to run right up to him at, what did you think about Caitlin Clark winning Athlete of the Year and how she took credit for the league? Boom. And then that just gives them a license to tee off. She's headed off at the pass. It gives her a little bit of leeway. And I think you have to put yourself in her shoes. She's not Jason Whitlock. She's not the successful writer who has control of his own destiny and all these other things that Jason has. The fortunate, because he's a talented writer and a talented speaker and a talented tastemaker, he can say and do. Caitlin Clark's not in that position. She may be the money train. She may be the breadwinner for that league, but she is not the name of that league. She doesn't even have a say in that league. So you just got to you have to look at it this way. She does this, she gets away, she lives to fight another day. So I don't have a problem with it. Unfortunately, other people do. And I get why, because you're giving too much respect to people that didn't really build up a league. They treated the WNBA as their own personal tax write-off. They did whatever they wanted to do. They got, Caitlin Clark made $75,000 a year, and people thought that was a big deal. That's what's the median average salary is $45,000 for a person in these United States. And she was making more than that in half a year playing basketball. And a lot of these other women are making that money playing basketball. And until Caitlin Clark showed up, they were not making the necessary money to pay back the league. Now, the NBA doesn't mind because it's a tax write-off. It's the greatest tax write-off. $1 billion tax write-off here, $1 billion tax write-off there. They don't care. It's fine. But Caitlin Clark has to walk this line, or else it's going to be worse for her down the road. And that makes sense. I get it. You just have to make sure that you're doing things not short-sighted, and you have to do things from a position of strength. Caitlin Clark does not have a position of strength right now. Oh, well, she's the face of the league. And guys, like I said, she was getting fouled really hard last year. She nearly lost her eye. You have other players openly questioning her and openly saying how much they dislike her. And she's going to come out and be like, yep, blah, 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 blah. It's all me. Suck it, losers. I mean, we'd love that. We'd be like, yeah, that's great. But nah, it's not going to happen. It cannot happen. Even if she wanted to say it, her publicist and her PR team are probably going, you're not saying that. You're giving respect to the people before you. You're going to give yourself a little credit, but you're going to throw it back on them. It's going to make your life so much easier down the road. And then you know what? Most of you would do that too. I would probably do it. I would probably do it too. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I would do this. Probably not. I mean, I say stuff here, but I didn't think 1,500 of you were going to be watching right now, which, by the way, I love it. Thank you so much. If you are new to the program and you just found me out, do me a favor. Hit the follow button on the X machine and stay up to date with all my fantastic takes and memes and just general sparkling personality. All right, next up. This one came up over the weekend as a new name has emerged as a potential ATF pick. Now, as a gun guy, the founder of L1121 Strategies, was a Catholic 2A group, which specializes in firearms training with a Catholic perspective. I, along with many other people in the gun community, are anxiously awaiting what Donald Trump is actually going to do with the ATF position. Because, as I said in the opening, Pam Bondi, not great. Matthew Gaetz, which apparently he didn't want to be in Congress anymore, so he said, hey, nominate me for AG. They're not going to give it to me. I'm going to leave and go do a show on One American News Network. I have nothing against One American News Network, but that seems like kind of a downgrade. Anyway, if they offered me a show, would I take it? Yeah, but I'm a nobody sitting in a bedroom. I'm not Matt Gaetz, guy, representative of Florida. He was a great representative because he did serve the people's interest. Now, I do give Gaetz credit because he's not a lifer. He's not a lifer. He left. and I'm sure they're going to find a good candidate out of that district. Although the district did have Joe Scarborough as a representative at some point, so who knows? Anyway, we had a guy like Matt Gaetz that could have been our AG. He's not. Now we got Pam Bondi. She's not great on the 2A, and I'm going to say that until she proves me wrong. And now we have Trump, who's back in office. I voted for him 3 times, so still not great on guns. Bump stock Donnie. He is what he is. You got to own that record. So we're all looking at the ATF as our olive branch to the gun community. All right. Here's a guy who is going to strip away a lot of the bureaucracy, who's going to rein in the overzealous brown shirt agents of the ATF who are running around and are shutting down gun stores and harassing civilians, while there are groups of men in Chicago with giggle switches. If you don't know what that is, send me an email or send me a message on X and I'll tell you. And then you got the Venezuelan gangs who are running around with machine guns. ATF is nowhere to be found with that stuff. You got an old guy with a bump stock somewhere in Nebraska, and they got Blackhawks and every other militarized vehicle coming after them. So, yes, we are interested in a potential ATF pick, and who could it be? So this came out this weekend. This guy, Blake Masters. Anybody know who Blake Masters is? I know who the AK guy is. I support the AK guy for ATF head. I know who Mason Cawthorn is because he was a representative from South Carolina, and he was on Timcast a couple weeks ago, and he made a very strong case for why he wanted to be ATF head. And so all of a sudden, this dude just kind of comes out of nowhere. So this is by the great Cam Edwards at bearingarms.com. Since Donald Trump won his resounding victory last month, gun owners have been eagerly awaiting to see what he plans to do with the ATF. While Trump has made scores of official appointments, he's remained quiet about who will head up the ATF. But Semfer, I don't know who Semfer is because he didn't say who Semfer was. Semfer reported over the weekend that one contender met with Trump's transition team, Blake Masters. Apparently, he is an Arizona venture capitalist who previously ran for U.S. Senate against Mark Kelly. Oh, good. So he is a loser when it comes to that. Apparently, anybody from Arizona, I'm weird with. And can we stop trying to run Carrie Lake for stuff? Can we please? Who was it? DC Drano's like, maybe she should run for senator in Iowa against Joni Ernst. How about she go do a show on One American News Network? Right? She can't even win a position of dog catcher. So can we stop trying to make her like a candidate? Just let her, you had a good try. You tried to be a female Donald Trump. People obviously rejected it twice. Just let it go. Anyway, so this Arizona venture capitalist was originally interested in heading up the presidential personnel office, but Semfer reports that after Trump tapped George Sergio Gore, who I don't know who the hell these people are, who heads up Donald Trump's publishing company, Masters has turned his attention to the ATF. If Masters does get the nod, he won't have an easy path simply due to the history of the ATF director position, which involves oversight politically sensitive gun policies. President Joe Biden pulled his first ATF nominee, David Chipman, before his second nominee, Steve Dettelbach, was confirmed in 2022. Even that's something of an accomplishment. Trump's ATF nominee, Chuck Canterbury, was withdrawn in 2020, and Dettelbach was only the second ATF director ever confirmed by the Senate. Masters may appeal to pro-gun Republicans, though, having campaigned as a pro-gun Senate candidate with video proof. Cam, what the hell does that mean? What does that mean? The guy was on a friggin' he stood out in the desert with a gun. How many guys have done this? How many politicians have gone out and said, I love my guns, and they have like a double barrel shotgun? Nothing against double barrel shotguns. They're pretty awesome. And then they're like, I love my guns and I'm going to protect your Second Amendment. And then they don't. It's going to take more than a guy with a video proof. They can afford up to 3 defections on any nominee. In case you've forgotten or missed it during Masters' run, this is him with his gun. Yay. Blah, 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 blah. So Masters builds his own guns, including unserialized firearms that Biden thinks are ghost guns. So I you know what? Okay, fine. If he builds his own firearms, if he's familiar with how that all works, good. Masters believes that when founders penned the Second Amendment, they were both guaranteeing the right to own guns and anticipating that citizens would build them. In the colonial days, you were expected to know not just how to fire a weapon, but how to reload it, and probably to fix low-level things that went wrong with it. If gunsmithing wasn't in your wheelhouse, then there were people in your community that could do it as well. So, I mean, he's fine with all of that. So good. If honestly, let's have this reiterated. I am a big fan of Brandon Herrera. I'm even Brandon Herrera first, Carl Thorne second, and this guy I think would probably be a good third. And apparently you can afford up to 3 defections on any candidate, but really, I just like to get somebody in there. And it's very important that we get Pete Hegseth confirmed as the DoD secretary. Do I care? No. I don't have a vested interest in that, but I do understand that we already lost one with the attorney general pick, Gates. If we lose Hegseth, Trump's not going to get anybody. So you got to get Hegseth in, then you got to get RFK Jr. in, you got to get the rest of them, and then you got to push to get this ATF pick in there. You got to get Dettelbach out, and you got to get him in. And at this point, yes, I would love to have Brandon Herrera as the person who has the keys to the ATF. But anybody other, honestly, it's like anybody but Dettelbach, anybody but Dummenbach and his litany of goons that are running the ATF right now. That's all they are. They're just a bunch of goons who run the ATF. They don't run it well, and they use it to abuse the rights of everyday citizens. I'm more concerned with Trump getting rid of the unconstitutional Office of Gun Violence Prevention that Joe Biden put in there unconstitutionally. Yes, I know it's an executive position, but I feel it violates the Second Amendment at the federal level. And I think it needs to go. And I think it needs to go now. That's more important than anything else. But yes, I think anybody but Dettelbach is an improvement at this point. Obviously, I'd like Brendan Herrera, but if it ends up being Blake Masters, great. As long as he's not Steve Dummenbach. That's all I care about. That guy is a menace. He's nothing but a moron and a bureaucrat who stumbled his way into that position. He doesn't know anything about firearms. It's been proven time and time again. So yes, that's the ATF position. Really just kind of like, hey, this popped up over the weekend. I always like to do gun stories because I want to keep our God-given right to keep and bear arms in the conversation. And I want to make sure that people are talking about it instead of that one corner of the internet, which, is fine. I think is fine. But still, I'd like to have more people understand what's going on day in and day out. All right. Our last story of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is. The trailer for 28 Days Later has been dropped. It dropped today. And I'm not going to play it because I'll probably get copyright. And I would not like that. But I will say this. Huge fan of the first 28 Days Later. I don't mind 28 weeks later. It's fine. It definitely doesn't hold up. It doesn't feel like the same universe almost with 28 days later, 28 weeks later. This 28 years later feels like a return to the original film. And what you're seeing with this is a style that, I don't know what to say. It is very different than what you see with most trailers are what? They're dark, they're cringy. They have sequences that don't seem to make sense. And the worst thing about most trailers is that they're always set to the background of like 12 songs from the 80s that are put to a piano. They're slowed down and they're played by piano, and they're overdrawn and over melodramatic. The first thing that jumps out to you is how well this trailer uses the footage as far as it being shot and bright and colorful, which I'm sure if you're into films, you notice everything looks like it was filmed on the exact same thing. This one, you can actually see the colors. You can see the screen. You can see what's going on, even though we don't know what the hell it is, but we still have an idea what the film's style will be. Secondly is the Boots poem. If you've watched this trailer, you understand that there's something disturbing about it. There's something disturbing about this trailer, and that is that it doesn't have that 80s soundtrack with it. It has a poem. Rudyard Kipling's Boots is the name of the poem that is essentially the music track behind it. And it was published in 1903. Who died in 1936 at the age of 70. It's titled Boots, making reference to the repetition of the British Army infantry forced to march in South Africa during the Second Boer War. And if you haven't watched the 28 Years Later trailer, watch it after this show because it's absolutely worth it. And it's a good trailer. It's a really good trailer. And hopefully Danny Boyle and the writer are it feels like their hands are everywhere on this one, trying to make sure that it's getting what the proper treatment. Because the second one had this deal where it was more of a film by committee. And this one feels like it was done by Danny Boyle and by the writer, Alex Garland, I believe it is. And it's definitely a proper connection to 28 days later. Now, of course, there are questions. I thought the virus was supposed to die out. How's it still going? If everybody's this, that, and the other thing. Hopefully, they will explain all that. And there's some weird rumors here. Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. There's some weird rumors. Hold on. Where is it? That apparently this is... Where are you? I know. Hold on. Where is he? Come on. Nope, not that. It'll be worth it. Hopefully. There he is. This is supposed to be Cillian Murphy. If you can see that. That's supposed to be Killian or Cillian Murphy. Because apparently he died and now he is a zombie. I don't know. Either that or they were able to get Jimmy Carter to make a guest appearance on this movie. Either way, heck of a cameo. I don't think it is, but that's the thing about a great trailer is you can discuss. Let me know if you think that's Cillian Murphy in the comment section down below. Or if you think that's just a wild goose chase. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that, in pop culture news, you actually had a decent, that comes out next year, comes out in the summer, which is a little weird. Typically, these types of films come out more in the fall, but I don't think they care about that because I think it's going to do well enough they don't have to have that around there. But it'll be interesting to see. It's at least, it's another sequel, obviously, in a sea of sequels, but at the same time, it's not the same. It won't have the same type of DNA, if that makes sense. Your Marvel movies, they have the same type of DNA. Most other sequels have the same type of DNA in them. This one doesn't look like it. It looks like a true sequel or a true successor to at least the first film. So we see it as well. And if you care, I'll just say, since we're talking about films, I watched the second Beetlejuice this weekend because it was on HBO Max. I enjoyed it. Of course, my opinion is a little different because I watched it at home on HBO Max and I didn't have to go to a theater or any of that kind of stuff. I think it was fine. I do get what some people were saying, that it feels a little overstuffed at the end. The middle's kind of a bit of a drag. The plot contrivance and some of these things were a little here, there, and everywhere. But overall, it's not I think more people are going to enjoy it. If you like the first film, if you like the first Beetlejuice, you'll enjoy it. Because it definitely has that DNA of the first film in it. And that's another film because that has Tim Burton written all over it. If you're a Tim Burton fan, you're going to love it. If you're not a Tim Burton fan, you're going to be like, this is just weird, which is a Tim Burton film. All right, folks, that is it for this episode of The Rick Cast. I, the aforementioned titular Rick, thank you for hanging out with me tonight. If you are following me on the X machine, please hit the follow button and retweet the show. It is live Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. Once again, on Thursday, it's going to be a little late because I'm going to be doing an interview with the Lepanto Institute. I will either go live later on or I'll do a preset of the show and I'll record it earlier in the day, and it won't be live, but it will be that day's topics. Let me know what you think in that regard. Do you think you want me to go live or do you want me to do a preset, a pre-recorded show so you can at least get that as well? Either way, you're going to get that day's topics and my opinion of them, because apparently it's so valuable. But I want to thank you once again for hanging out with me. You can send me messages on X, StradCath, or if you want to follow me on Instagram, StradCath as well. Once again, if you'd like to support the program or myself or my company, 1121 Strategy, L1121 Strategies, you can buy my book, The Armed Catholic, Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense. It is a Pro 2A book with a Catholic perspective, which is a reflection of my organization, The Armed Catholic, the Catholic Case for Guns and Self-Defense. I am the Armed Catholic. My organization is called L1121 Strategies. And if you are interested in firearms training or advice or consultation, if you're a Catholic or a Christian and you're looking for something there, you can check out my website, thearmedcatholic.com, or send me an email, info@thearmedcatholic.com. All right. I'm going to say it one more time. Thank you for hanging out with me, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, free Dexter Taylor.